So for those who don't know, like, there's obviously been a Israeli-Palestine conflict since 1948, where obviously Palestine was occupied by the Brits. Surprise, surprise. It was the British mandate for Palestine in 1922. So in 1922 it was the British mandate for Palestine. In 1948, so after the Second World War, they basically decided to split because of what happened to Jewish people during the Holocaust, and the fact that Jewish people have like a historic claim to that region. They decided to basically split Palestine up into a Jewish state and an Israeli state, so Palestine and Israel. The UN oversaw it. And they had allocated territories, allocated resources, etc. And however, obviously the Palestinians weren't happy with it, because that's like, you can't just come in and like take our land and like just be like, okay, we're gonna install a new nation state here, like we're here, we've been here. And since then there's been a raging like Israeli-Palestinian conflict, where Israelis have obviously grown in strength as a nation state, and as a result of that they have begun to encroach on Palestinian territory. They have like, so at the time, Palestinians were separated largely into the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and then Jerusalem was basically kept as a neutral zone because of its religious importance to, Abrahamic religion. So it was kept as a neutral zone, and the rest of the territory was split up. But Israel has since encroached on, the West Bank, on Gaza Strip. They have established is illegal Israeli. When I say illegal, I'm talking internationally, that they're illegal settlements across Palestinian lands. They've been brutalizing Palestinian people for decades. Like every single human rights report on Palestinian issue has spoken about how Gazans and people in the West Bank are literally living, and I mean this like the quote from the UN Human Rights Report, in unlivable conditions. Like that. This is not me. This is not this is not an customary invocation of pathos here. Like, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not talking in hyperbole. The words from the UN are unlivable conditions. This has been happening like for years. So they've just been expanding their territory. The IDF, so the Israeli Defense Forces, are absolutely formidable, force, and literally they're just brutalizing Palestinians, stealing Palestinian land. This has been happening obviously consistently throughout the 1948, but recently over the past I think it was like, is it the past week or so, past few weeks? Yeah. So there's this neighborhood in East Jerusalem, so by the way, I need to talk about how America specifically had have a hand in this. So America give $3.8 billion in aid to Israel every single year. And that obviously funds the military and therefore funds what they do, which is steal Palestinian land and brutalize Palestinian people. So last year, Donald Trump, so 2009, or maybe it might have been earlier, I can't remember, but at some point in his presidency, Donald Trump claimed Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel, which is really, really, really dangerous, because as I mentioned, no matter what was going on with the conflict, Jerusalem was a no-go zone. It was untouchable. So to now overturn 70 years of consensus and claim Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel is basically, there's no conflict there now. Is no matter whatever resistance the Palestinian people had, you have quelled it by not even naming their resistance as a resistance, because you've just said that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And as a result of that, it's obviously given the Israeli forces further and a more rigid and a more muscular mandate over Jerusalem, where there's Palestinian people living. So now there's a neighborhood in East Jerusalem called Sheikh Jarrah, which I think it's like, I can't remember the figure. It's either 4 or 6 families.
Yeah. I think they want 4 to leave. They wanted 4 to leave by the 2nd, and then another 4 or something by August.
I think it's 7 that was by August. I've read figures, but basically the point is that there are a number of families. So by the way, this thing of uprooting people from their houses only to build illegal Israeli settlements has been happening, and now attention has been drawn to the cases in Sheikh Jarrah where there's Palestinian families living in Palestinian homes that some families have already been evicted. So literally they've turned up at their doorstep. Israeli people have just come in and been like, no, you can't enter the house, basically. Like, and obviously because the IDF are on the sides of the Israeli people, that they're allowed to do that. And it's an ongoing thing where I think 4 have already been forcibly evicted, and now there's a further 4 or 7 that are due to be evicted this month, and then some more in August, basically. And then yesterday there was an incident at Al-Aqsa mosque where the IDF basically barricaded a mass, because obviously it's Ramadan and people are praying and all that kind of stuff. One thing I forgot to mention was that as a result of this, the Palestinians have been peacefully protesting. They have been peacefully protesting, and they have been met, as always, whenever there is a peaceful Palestinian protest, they are always met with brutality. The soldiers are literally, the IDF are spraying them with skunk water, they're hitting them with rubber bullets, like people have been killed, people have been maimed, injured, and then yesterday there was a clash I say clash, but it was an attack. Like the news... they're reporting it as a clash, but it was an attack.
You can watch the videos.
Yeah, literally go and watch the videos and you can see for yourself what happened. There was a group of Palestinian Muslims in the masjid, and the IDF basically barricaded them, attacked them. 4 people have lost eyes. I think 153 people have been injured. It is just an absolute sorry state of affair. And one thing I want to say now is that I think this Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the way that it's been presented throughout the course of its history has been that it's a polarizing issue, that it's something that polarizes, that you're either on one side or the other, and there's so much nuance and we have to consider this and we have to consider that. And I'm sorry, but like, it's now at a point where it's not polarizing. It is very, very black and white. Israel is a settler colonial state. What is going on is apartheid. Nelson Mandela, from when he was alive, called Palestine and Israel issue apartheid. The man who spent 27 years in jail for fighting apartheid, who knows what apartheid is, has called it apartheid. Like, we cannot dress it up in any other way than what it is right now. It is ethnic cleansing. It's genocide. Like, that is what is going on in Palestine right now.
I don't understand how you could if you look at the area and see the map of what was considered Israel, what's Palestine, see over the years just less.
Yep.
And now, like, how can you not have a problem?
Yeah. Like, if literally, guys, if there are people listening right now who have not heard anything or who don't know much, I implore you right now, go onto Google and type in the map of Palestine, Israel in 1948 and look at the map right now. They call it the Green Line, right? And you'll see what has been encroached on, and that the encroachment of land. So again, first of all, I just want to reiterate, it is internationally illegal. What these Israeli settlements, they are internationally, there's no debate, there's no nuance to be made here. They're illegal, that's it, period. But it's not just an encroachment of land that is a self-contained thing. It comes with the brutalization of Palestinians. Like, you have to imagine what is happening for Israelis to be able to create these illegal settlements. It's that they are brutalizing Palestinian people. They are stripping Palestinians of their human rights. I've heard stories over and over and again on social media, on the internet, from people who are Palestinians, who have family back in Palestine, talking about they have no freedom of movement. They have passports taken away from them. Their electricity gets cut off all the time. They are beaten in, like, walking down the streets. They are brutalized by the Israeli forces. They cannot go from they cannot go from A to B without having to pass numerous checkpoints. They're literally living in an apartheid state right now.
Thinking as well about the most recent events, like you say, it's obviously this is the most holy month.
Exactly, and this happens a lot during Ramadan, by the way. Like,
and also that mosque that happened at, I read, apparently it's the 3rd most holy site in Islam.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's just, even if you were to, like, obviously this is an issue, but and this is wrong, but even if you were to say that they had any right to be doing what they were doing, the fact that they were doing it during this most holy month, at this most holy site, like it's just, I want to say rude, but it's barbaric. Like,
yeah. There's no way to dress up what the IDF are doing and what Israel is doing. Like, there's literally no way. Anybody who knows any facts, there is no way. Like, the way people are being killed and maimed and injured, and they have no human rights. Like, I'm not, and this is not even coming from me. Like, okay, fine. If people are listening to this and think that I might be biased because I'm a Muslim, literally read the UN report. Read the UN report. That's an independent inquiry from the very organization that created Israel. They're now even saying what they're doing is illegal. What they're doing is stripping and abusing human rights. Like,
any comments, Simran?
What I wanted to talk about was a slightly different side of it, and the side that I think probably affects us the most, and that's probably the censorship that has occurred, especially this last week, I believe, through platforms that are not just complacent now, they're complicit in what's going on. That is Instagram, YouTube, Google, Facebook. They've all been caught out, basically. And I saw a stat somewhere that Facebook, Google, and YouTube approved 95% of Israel's requests to censor Palestinian media.
It's like, oh my God, like, how can you hear something like that and not think what is going on is wrong? Like, even if you are still retaining an ambiguous position on the morality of who's right and who's wrong between Israel and Palestine, you hear that one side has requested for censorship. Why are they doing that? What have they got to hide? Clearly a lot.
Requesting for censorship in the first place, obviously terrible. Censorship is a human right violation. However, it's these platforms that we believe to be more Western, more liberal, supposed to promote freedom of speech, etc. 95% of requests were approved to censor that media.
But I think this is, and what Simran is saying is a more there's a wider comment to be made here about the role of the West in the Palestinian issue. Like I said, it was a British mandate that basically led to this. In the US right now, the US especially, you see. Listen, I can't say what I want to say on camera because I can't say it gracefully. There's no way for me to really say what I want to say and say it with grace. But the US, $3.8 billion every single year in aid to Israel, for Israel to basically brutalize Palestinians, for Donald Trump to come on and say that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Like, they are very, very deliberately, very willfully taking part in this program of ethnic cleansing. There's no two ways about it. It's coming from the West. The reason why Israel is so they're so bold in doing what they're doing is because they know they can't be, there's gonna be consequences for anybody who goes against them. And another thing I want to say, which is disgusting to me, is the Gulf states right now that are naturalizing relationships with Israel, like Qatar and the UAE and these places. They are naturalizing relationships with them because they're being pragmatic and whatever else. And as a Muslim, I'm speaking now on like in the capacity as a Muslim, that is horrendous. Like, it's so horrendous. How can a Muslim state like with a Muslim population look at that and like, it's just, it's disgusting.
Yeah, that doesn't really make any sense to me when you think about like Qatar, UAE, and like the rigid life of Islam, the faith that they live by. It's ingrained.
That's in
their
vision.
society.
That's not. None of us are saying to them, "Oh, you guys are an Islamic state." That's them. That's them saying we're an Islamic state. So what you man doing then?
If you're not gonna stick,
look at your head, innit? Look at your head.
You know what's like so sad as well is that obviously the Holocaust was horrific. Anti-Semitism to this day is horrific, and it's a massive problem. But in regards to how this all came about, it was obviously following World War II, and it was this idea, this reality that Jews are being oppressed and they want somewhere to call their home, and that's what the whole idea of Zionism is that Jews deserve their homeland.
A historic homeland for the Jewish people.
So effectively, when they're coming to Palestine, it was as refugees. And now to be then like 50 years later and to be
do ethnic cleansing the way that they were ethnically cleansed.
It's so make sad. Sense. Like I don't understand how you can justify that.
Yeah,
like,
you can't.
And it does also irk me the way that a lot of people, if you try to question the idea of the Israel
as a nation state,
taking over Palestine,
they'll say it's anti-Semitism.
Yeah, like you'll immediately say, "Oh, well, what, you don't like Jews then?" It's no, that's not what we're saying.
Yeah. And this was actually a big thing of in the smear campaign against Corbyn, and this was one of the reasons why I backed Corbyn so much, because he was the first mainstream politician that I've ever in my lifetime saw come forward and outwardly, explicitly stick up for the Palestinian people, because people are so afraid to do that because of accusations of anti-Semitism. Just to clarify for those listening right now, Zionism and Judaism are two different things. Judaism is a religion, Zionism is a political ideology. Right? And to have a problem with Zionism and the way it has manifested in the Israeli nation state is not to have a problem with Judaism. You cannot, the two are often so, the two are too often conflated, because Judaism is an ethno religion, right? But they're two very different things. And when we talk about Zionism, we're not talking about Judaism.
I think another thing to emphasize is that we are by no means condoning, just like the IDF, we're not condoning any form of violence or force or terrorism that has occurred from Palestinians towards Israelis. We're not saying like, oh, it's justifiable for people to be killed or whatever is happening. But at the same time, if this is actually happening, you always have to think, why is this happening? What has led to this happening?
It's a war. Like, at the end of the day, it's a war. Like, I think because it's so it's just been so ongoing for so long, and it's incremental almost. People don't see that this is a war, but go on the ground and see what's happening on the ground, and then you'll understand, like.
And it is kind of like, where do we go from here? Because being realistic, do we think in 20 years' time will Palestine exist?
Honestly, I say as always, like, my solidarity always is with Palestine. Like, freedom for Palestine, always. Like, liberation for one thing that a lot of my own political practice revolves around. So, like, I've spoken about it before on the show, like how Black liberation is a really kind of fundamental cornerstone of my own political practice, right? Well, Black liberation is also very intimately tied with Palestinian liberation. So many of the foremost, like, great Black liberation leaders, Fred Hampton, Angela Davis, Malcolm X, spoke very, very explicitly, very, very clearly about Palestinian liberation as an appendage of Black liberation. Angela Davis, who, by the way, for those who don't know, is one of my favorite political figures of all time, living or dead, a woman who I admire and respect so much, has spoken about Palestine being the litmus test for liberationary politics. And she's spoken about how where you stand with the Palestine issue speaks volumes to your own liberation politics. So for anybody who claims to stand for liberty and for truth and for human rights, think about where you're standing with this Palestine issue. Think about what you're talking about.
Any final comments, Simran?
I think just to end it, like, just to speak about ways, I think, as what we can do to help, in a sense, because obviously I understand for people here that feel affected by it, obviously it's very frustrating, like having to see the horrible images and stuff that come out, or the stories and the videos that come out. It's absolutely heartbreaking and devastating. It's devastating, and it's frustrating for the average person who wants to stand in solidarity with Palestine and feels that they can't, because obviously we're not there, and different, restrictions and stuff. So obviously there's a lot of like zakat organizations that you can donate to. There's like obviously the Palestinian in Gaza donation fund, and in general, obviously, if you can't donate, then you just have to educate yourself.
Yeah,
and learn and support it through spreading the word, in a sense.
Yeah. And be deliberate in the way that you talk about these issues. Like, like, again, this whole thing of, I feel like so much of the coverage on Palestine and Israel is trying to do the whole like, talk about both sides, you know, let's balance the story and whatever else. I'm sorry, but like some things are really just black and white, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, no, I think like you can like mention it like we've done now, like in terms. I think we've given quite like an. Obviously, we've just kept it.
It's
real.
objective. It's objective,
yeah.
bruv. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if one side, if you put a baby in a ring with Mike Tyson and Mike Tyson is battering the baby and the baby gives a few jabs back to Mike Tyson, are you then gonna be like, oh, there's two sides to be listened to here because the baby gave a few jabs back? No.
On a side note, though, I would be quite impressed if the baby did manage that. Like,